Hey guys, this time I have another JRPG for you all, and it's Tales of Zestiria. We're gonna be reviewing the PC version, but the game also came out on PS3 and PS4, and hopefully down the line I will be getting the PS4 version for my collection, but for now the digital version will have to do. Now, let's get one thing out of the way first, and people should know this. The PC port of Tales of Zestiria isn't that good. Now, that's not to say it's absolutely terrible, but it's not up to PC standards, and people nowadays care a lot about 60 FPS and whatnot. I don't think it's a bad port. I think it's perfectly functional, I think it's just fine, it plays well, and it looks every bit as good as the PS4 version, but apparently that's a problem because, according to modern day nerds, everything on PC has to be absolutely perfect or it's complete trash. For example, unless a game, I don't know, runs at 60 FPS and has 4K resolutions and high-end textures and whatever, it's not good. So, fortunately, there are some smart people out there who know how to program games and who understand how this stuff works, so they modded the game up and brought it up to PC standards. Now, most of the footage I have recorded is of this mod, so the game runs at 60 FPS, it looks better, whatever. However, had this mod not come out, I wouldn't have had a problem with the port because, you know, it looks every bit as good as the one on PS4 and the game runs well, it plays well, so who cares if it doesn't run at 60 FPS? Who cares if it's not perfect? I mean, it's a lot of fun, and that's all that matters to me. I'll be honest, when picking up a JRPG, the first thing I look for in a game like this is the story. Because, you know, there's plenty of other games out there I can play that have much better gameplay. JRPG gameplay can be rather taxing, it can be tedious and tiring, and, you know, I'm not saying it's not fun, I'm just saying that if I don't have to, you know, experience a certain type of story, I'm not gonna bother playing a JRPG. Even though I've played a ton of them, because I do enjoy their stories for the most part. So, in Tales of Zestiria, I looked at the game and I was like, you know, this seems like it has a lot of potential to have a great storyline. And I know that the Tales series has, at least for me, always had great characters. Now, they're not something outstanding that we haven't seen before or anything, but they are always likable and, you know, an enjoyable bunch to go on an adventure with. So, with that in mind, I got the game, and I'm a patient guy, and this game does have a bit of a slow start according to some, but for me, I like what it had from the very beginning. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, the storyline is great, however, I felt that it needed to be a little bit more expressive, because the base plot is fantastic and it does take some time to pick up, and it does pick up eventually, and you have a very interesting premise there. It's a world where, I don't know, you have humans and angel-like beings called seraphim that live together. Now, the humans cannot see these angel-like beings. Some people can see them, some cannot. Now, in this world, malevolence turns people into monsters. Again, your average person cannot see these monsters, and I think that's absolutely great the way they thought this out. However, the way it's all presented leaves a lot to be desired. I felt that it needed to be a little bit more impactful in its presentation, because it's a very interesting plot that just was not presented well enough, in my opinion. It wasn't poorly presented, it just left a lot to be desired. We have a bunch of interesting characters, as always, and they're anime cliches, alright, but they're good anime cliches. They're not, you know, they're not annoying. They're very charming people that you grow to like and care about throughout the game. They all have different personalities. Some of them are, I don't know, kind and nice. others are more rude, others are witty, and we have the main character who is a bit of a Mary Sue, I guess. He's, very nice and kind and wants to help everybody, but I think having a main character like this is all well and good because these games are primarily targeted at people who are at a very impressionable age, so, they're mostly played by teenagers or, kids, and it's good to have a positive role model, even if that character is unrealistic. That's not to say the main guy here, Saray, is unrealistic, but he's a little bit too nice and too kind given the situation he and his friends are in. Tales of Zestiria is as much of a personal tale as it is a tale about the world these characters live in. So, it's a world torn by war and political tension, and we see just how all that affects its inhabitants, and I find it rather impressive because, as I already said, one of the most interesting things about this world is that your average person, human being, cannot see the angel-like entities that live in their world, but they also cannot see the monsters. Now, in most JRPGs and RPGs in general, we have monsters roaming the world, attacking people or whatever, and people in these worlds refer to these animals as monsters, even though they are out there living their lives just like any other type of wild animal would. So why they call them monsters is beyond me, and I always find that annoying. I mean, you can imagine just how many JRPGs we've seen over the years, and they all, or most of them, refer to creatures as monsters, and I find it exceptionally annoying. Now, in Tales of Zestiria, monsters are actual monsters that people cannot see. So, monster attacks in this world are blamed on wild animal attacks or, criminal activities of people who have turned into monsters, but since the average person isn't aware of this, all they see is a human being committing a crime. And I find that very, very well thought out. Now, the main character, Saray, has the ability to see these monsters and to see and interact with the angel-like beings called Seraphim, because he grew up with them, so that allowed him to be able to see them. Now, this is something I also find rather fascinating. Saray is not some random person chosen by fate to be, as it is called in this world, the shepherd, and there's an actual explanation of why and how he came to be the way he is. And that's something I greatly respect because I'm not a fan of Chosen One stories at all. The story also doesn't shy away from dealing with some rather dark themes. For example, you have children who turned into monsters or hellions as they're called in this world and have committed some pretty bad atrocities. Now, I'm not going to spoil the story, I'm just going to tell you that there's a lot of stuff that, surprised me that they would do in this story. However, none of this is presented the way I feel it should have been. It's just not impactful enough to the story or characters. Everything is just there, kind of told in passing. And I like the way, the story wraps up. I like the way everything, comes together. I like the way characters interact with each other. It's absolutely wonderful seeing, your crew joke and talk to each other and deal with some more emotional, situations they find themselves in. However, none of it is presented as well as it could have been, given how amazing the premise is.
With your hair down, I need to set it properly to make sure it doesn't get in the way during battle.
As is the case with most well-made RPGs and Tales of games, Tales of Zestiria is chock full of content. There's a lot to be seen and done in this huge world. You have different side quests, optional dungeons, optional fights. Like, for example, there are these fights where you have to go through waves of enemies with a specific character. So good luck if that character ain't equipped right or if they're not strong enough. However, before I get into the good stuff, I want to talk a little bit about the not so good aspects of the gameplay. And that is the equipment system. Now, I don't like complex games, alright? And I don't like it when games try to waste my time with stuff I don't deem relevant or entertaining. The equipment system in this game is exceptionally convoluted, confusing, and unnecessarily complex. Fortunately, the game understands this, and for us casuals, we can go through the entire game and even most of the optional content without worrying about it too much. However, if you want to play on harder difficulties above normal or above, I know there's this difficulty between normal and hard. I think it's moderate. That should be enough for a casual. However, you have to worry more about the equipment system there. If you want to, play on high difficulties, you have to understand this system well. And I'm sure that this is something hardcore RPG fans are going to enjoy a lot because they can sink their teeth into something complex. I personally hate that kind of stuff. However, for us casuals, it is rather confusing, and I'll try to explain it to the best of my abilities, and it's probably not going to make much sense even if I do. So what you have is, you have to understand that in this game you cannot judge your equipment items based on stats alone. So buying the latest doesn't mean it's going to be the best. As you fight battles and explore the world, you obtain different equipment, as is the case with all other RPGs. This equipment has, other than its base stats, has different skills attached to it, and this is good. Now, in order to make the most out of your items, you need to fuse them together, and you can do this by fusing the same type of item. For example, I don't know, you have an amber sword or something like that, and you have a bunch of amber swords. What you need to do is mine their skills, the ones they come with, and fuse them in a way so that you can get the right skills that suit your gameplay style best. And this is all well and good. However, it's so complex that you end up wasting your time trying to get just the right. Even if you get the gist of how it all works, which I did, it's still just, in my opinion, not worth wasting your time on, because even if you happen to get the skill set you want for a certain item, it may not quite match the other items. I don't know, each skill has, different types, and then what happens is that when your items don't all match up, they're slightly underpowered compared to what they would be if they are all, have matching skills of the same type. Now, even this goes deeper than that, and there's just no end. It's a layer after layer after layer of complexity with this equipment system that at the end leads nowhere. I mean, why would you want to waste your time on this? I don't know. I don't care. Fortunately, the game doesn't force it on you, and that's why I was able to finish it. If this game forced it on me, I would have done one of two things. I would have either dropped the game or went ahead and just used cheats. Now, I did use a trainer because I wanted to level up faster, and I leveled up quite a bit just to realize that, holy crap, leveling in this game means so little, because even though I used the trainer to get myself to level 50 so that I don't waste time, grinding, there was no point of being level 50 when my equipment wasn't right. So I had to learn fusion, I had to understand the system, and then once I did that, everything started falling into place. Again, I just learned the basics, alright? If you go through this game's help menu or help section, you'll see that it's an entire lesson after lesson after lesson about the game's systems, how it all works, and believe me, I think that's just too much. Anyway, now on to the good stuff, and that is combat. Now, I will say this. Combat is not as good as it was in Tales of Grace's F. I don't remember the combat in Tales of Zestiria. I cannot compare it to that because I never finished those games, even though I loved the first one a lot. I will go back to them and play them when I have some time. While combat in Tales of Zestiria does feel a little stiff, it's still a lot of fun, and you really need to learn to utilize your different moves, your different attacks. You need to know when to dodge and when to defend. So overall, it is a lot of fun, although it can get a little taxing and tiring later in the game. Learning to exploit different enemy weaknesses, usually elemental weaknesses, and to pull off proper combos, plays a very important role in combat. However, I never quite got the hang of pulling off some of these more complex moves, even though they are not so complex as they require good timing. And I did, have a bit of trouble there, but overall, I had fun with the game's combat system. Now, one thing I really like is that if you do happen to go into battle with a not that good, not very suitable moveset or equipment, you can change that on the fly. You just pause the game, bring up your menu, and you can adjust your moveset, you can adjust your equipment right there in the middle of combat. And that's something I greatly respect about this game. Another really fun feature about combat is the aromatization feature. Basically what happens is a human character and a seraph character can fuse together. Now, only 2 of the 3 playable human characters in the game can fuse with Seraphim, and that's alright, because, it makes sense story-wise, and you barely get to play with the character who cannot fuse, so it's all good. And what really makes this stand out is just how overpowered you are once you fuse with a Seraphim. Now, hardcore players, I've heard, they like to only fuse when absolutely needed because of, challenge or whatever. Me, man, I fuse every chance I get. First, because it's very badass to just see your character be overpowered. Second, it makes the game easier, and I like being overpowered in my RPGs and games in general. I don't care about balancing, I don't care about any of that stuff. I just like kicking butt in games, and this game really does that quite well. So, of course, you still you can still die and you can still mess up. That's not to say this is God mode, it's not. And you have to understand that if you die during this state and you don't have the right boons and, bonuses set up outside of combat, both of your characters are going to die. However, there's something interesting that if one of the characters, if the human character is dead and your Seraphim is alive, you can fuse and they revive your human character, so that's a very nice feature there. So overall, combat is good. It can get a little tiring later on. It is stiffer than I'd like it to be. It just doesn't flow as nicely as it did in, as I said, Grace's AF. That, or maybe I'm just not that good at it, which is probably the case, but it was a lot of fun. Now on to something I really care about in games, and that is visuals and overall aesthetics of the game. Tales of Grace's IF is a good looking game, rather it has a good looking world. However, visually, once again, it's not on par with Tales of Zestiria, and I just don't understand why they completely forgot about that beautiful cel-shaded look that made the game look just as good as their 2D anime cutscenes. I just cannot understand why this company just up and dropped a wonderful, beautiful art style like that. Tales of Zestiria had the best art direction in the series. You'd think that they'd want to keep, that type of art direction for all their games. Nope. Instead, we are back to the Tales of Grace's AF and Tales of Hearts R and all that other, kind of generic 3D look. It doesn't look bad, but, compared to, I think that, in my opinion, Exilia looked much better than this. And it's very disappointing because, there is a beautiful world there, and the environments can range from average and generic to quite nice and rather stunning looking. However, there is always that, notion that something is lacking in the visuals. They lack that special something Zestiria had. It's like they're just there, and they just kind of went through the motions and created, your average generic anime graphics and didn't really bother to invent much. And that's a real shame. Now, monster designs are decent enough. Again, they're not outstanding, they're not anything we haven't seen. I'm going to have to compare it to Zestiria once again, because that game had fantastic monster designs as well. Here everything is generic, and that, in my opinion, is a bit of a problem. It's not to say the game isn't, good looking when it wants to be, but when it really needs to be good looking, it just looks dull. And that is during the dungeons. Now, for the most part, dungeons are exceptionally boring looking. Now, here's the kicker. Here's what really pisses me off about the game's lackluster dungeon design as far as the visuals go. You have some of these dungeons, especially the elemental dungeons, have fantastic music. Now, this game overall has a very good musical score, something that required better visual presentation as well to match this type of music. Now, you have your elemental dungeons. They have absolutely incredible music that really fits the theme of the dungeon, the element. However, visually, they are boring. They do not match properly with the music. They leave so much to be desired. You just look at these at most generic dungeons that, we've seen in games for years now. And to me, this is a real problem because I need good visuals to be motivated to go through dungeons like this. Combat is fun, but it can only get you so far because you hear this amazing music and you see a different dungeon in your head, one that is not there in the game. And that's a real shame. Unfortunately, this is something that for me was a big issue in the game. Not big enough for me to not enjoy this game, but a big enough problem for me to think that, holy crap, there was so much more that could have done, and I don't understand why. A creative team of professionals, we're not even looking at indie developers here, we are looking at professionals, could not come up with more creative dungeons as far as visuals go. Now, design-wise, the dungeons can get very complex, very convoluted at times. However, I assume this is something hardcore fans enjoy, so I don't complain about that because eventually you're going to find your way around the dungeon and you have a nice clear map. So that's not an issue here. We have an issue with the visual look of the dungeons, and that's just no good. But as I said, music in this game is outstanding when it wants to be. It ranges from, generic, not bad, just generic, to really, really outstanding. Voice acting is also very good. Not all voice actors do a wonderful, outstanding job. However, for the most part, the voices are very soulful. You get to actually, relate to the characters based on voice and diction and acting alone. And that's very important in a story-driven game, in my opinion, especially in this day and age when we have more and more fully voiced games such as this one, as opposed to bits and pieces of voice here and there and silent dialogue for the most part. So, voice acting is excellent in Tales of Zestiria. Overall, this was a very enjoyable adventure for me, and somehow it all comes together better than its individual components are. So I don't have a problem with the game overall, even though I did have a lot of complaints. I definitely enjoyed my adventure and spent 70 hours with this game. It was a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I would recommend it to people because in general, I cannot tell somebody to go out there and buy an RPG when an RPG lasts anywhere from 50 to 70 to 100 hours, and whether or not they will enjoy the game, I do not know. These are a little more, specific games that not everybody can enjoy. However, if you can give the game a chance, borrow it from a friend or something, see if you like it. If you do think this is a game for you, I don't know, maybe wait for a sale and pick it up and see how you enjoy it. Well, this was another long review, and we're wrapping it up here. Hope you all enjoy the game if you do choose to give it a chance. If you don't like it in the first, 5-6 hours, don't waste your time with it. You probably won't like the rest. It's an RPG, it's a big game, and if you don't have the time to invest in it, you don't have to try to like it. I did, I liked it a lot, despite my complaints. And well, guys, that's about it.